The Dark Frigate, Chapter 13, A Bird to be Limed. A lad being called into council by such a man as Tom Jordan might well think himself a fine fellow, and rare enough were lads whom Tom Jordan would thus have summoned. But although Philip Marsham, it seemed, had taken the old one's eye and won his heart long before on the little hill beside the road, when Phil had drawn the wind from Martin's sails, and although it had not escaped Tom Jordan that Phil's hand moved easily toward his weapon, the old proverb has it, "A man that flattereth his neighbor spreadeth a net for his steps, and he that whistleth merrily spreadeth his nets cunningly, and hunteth after his prey greedily." "So, come, boatswain, and lend us thy wit," cried Tom. "4 heads shall provide more wisdom than 3. And with that he clapped Phil on the back, and drew him into the cabin, where Jacob and the mate sat deep in talk of the night's adventures. "A hawk, when she is first dressed and ready to fly," said Jacob, "is sharp set, and hath a great will upon her. If the falconer do not then follow it, she will be duelled for ever after." "So, master, a man, yea, and a ship. A great will, sayest thou?" quoted the old one, and his voice revealed his sullen anger. "Why, then, did you not rake them with a broadside or twain?" With which he turned to Harry Malcolm, thus to include him in the charge. "For one thing," replied Malcolm, and testily, for his ill temper prevailed both aft and forward, "we gave the gunners no firing to learn them their guns. For another thing, the powder failed us. For yet another, since you say what you say, 'twere a mad foolish notion to run afoul a strange ship, for we have but a half that company we need to work a ship and fight. And finally, to cap our woeful proverbs, we know what we know, yea," and he shot a dark glance from under bent brows. "We know what we know. There be those who come toward us with their feet, but go from us with their hearts." His voice, as always, was light and quick, but there was a rumble in it, such as one may sometimes hear in a dog's throat. As the 3 men looked first at one and then at another, there came to Boatswain Marsham, sitting, as it were, outside their circle, the uneasy throbbing of their suspicion. "Of the powder," said Jacob coolly, "I have taken a little from each barrel." He laid on the table 7 packages wrapped in leaves from an old book. Regarding closely the notes he had written on each package, he opened them one by one and placed them in a row. "This," said he, "is from the barrel that good Harry Malcolm served out to the men, and that doubtless this man Candle hath used from his old days. It hath lost its strength by long laying. Press it with thy fingers, and thou shalt feel it soft to the touch. Here upon this white sheet of paper I lay 4 corns of this powder. This other powder," and he chose a second package, "is from a barrel new opened. Press it, and thou shalt see how firm and hard each corn, and this too is firm of a fair azure, and so also this, but this," and he first put his eyes close to the notes on each remaining package, and then held them far off, for his sight, although good at a great distance, made out with difficulty things near at hand. "This is from a barrel that hath lost its strength by moisture, and this hath a fault I shall tell you of." Taking a pinch of each, as he spoke, he had laid the corns, each some 3 fingers' distance from the next, in a circle on the paper. He then struck tinder, and then, lighting a match made of twisted cords, it strong lye ashes and saltpeter, he held it over a corn of good powder. There was a flash and a puff, and the ring of powder was gone. The corns of good powder had fired speedily, and left only a chalky whiteness in their place. Nor had they burned the paper or given off smoke. But the corns of good powder had turned slowly, and smoke had scorched the paper, and some had given forth smoke. The old one softly swore. And have we then, asked he, but 3 barrels of good powder? Nay, there are more than 3. This last is weak because they have neglected to turn the barrels upside down, so the peat has settled from the top to the bottom, as is its way. We shall find the bottom as strong as the top is weak, and by turning the barrel we shall renew its strength evenly. As for the powder that hath spoiled by long laying, cried Philip Marsham, I will undertake to make it as good as new. Do you, boatswain, mind your sails and cordage? Said old Jacob with a wry smile. And you wish to grind it into mortar, and that you may, but it's I that will measure the peat. Nay, I will make you, if you wish it, for a wonder to show friends, a powder of any color you please, white, red, blue, or green. Of the 3 who leaned over the packets of powder, old Jacob was the only one who bore with even temper the sad reverse of the night before, for master and mate glared at each other in such wrath as had thrown a shadow over every soul in the ship. Some had waked with aching heads, for which they had their own folly to think. Some were like men who dream they have got a great treasure, but wake to find pebble-stones or worse under the pillow. Since the porcupine ketch had yielded them no gold, and had stung them instead with their quills, in all truth the ship was by the ears, for, in extremities, your sea-sharks are uncertain friends, as a touch of foul weather will manifest to any man's satisfaction. Enough of this, said the old one, and he pushed aside the packets and folded his arms. We lose time. There is a thief amongst us. A thief, you say? And the hot red of anger burned itself way across the boatswain's face, for the 3 had turned and looked hard at him. The old one and Harry Malcolm then exchanged quick glances, and Jacob shut his small mouth tight and knotted his brows. Well, cried Phil, would you charge me with theft? Someone, said the old one, lingering over each word, hath wrought a clever plot against us. Say on, say on. He is a man, I make no doubt, whose buttons are breaking with venom. There was heavy silence in the cabin, Jacob pursing his lips and knotting his brow, looking from one of them to another, and Phil, vaguely on the defensive, drew back and gave them a gaze as steadily as they sent. He is doubtless a very cunning rascal, Harry Malcolm put in, who hath cut his cloth by his wits. But he is making a suit that will throttle him by its narrowness about the neck. The master and mate once more exchanged glances, and the old one then smiled lightly, as if again there were sunlight rippling over dark water. Nay, Philip, we think no ill of thee, but do thou have care to thy company. A foul trick hath been done with a mind to render us helpless at sea, so that we must crawl to the nearest land, where some base dunghill spirit is doubtless of a mind to leave our company. But we have resources, yea, and of thee, Philip, we think no ill. Despite their fair words, though they were watching Philip Marsham like 3 old tomcats watching a sparrow, and he, being no fool, knew the reason why. 3 hard faces they showed, the one handsome in a devilish way and keen, and the second unassuming, yet deeply astute, and marked by a deeper-rooted, if less frank, selfishness. The third older, wiser, more self-centered. The eyes of the master and mate were coldly cruel, but old Jacob was too intent on his own thoughts to be cruel, save by indifference. All that day Jacob squatted on the deck and toiled with tools and wood. From the wood he chose certain long pieces, fine-grained and straight, and dry and free from knots, and certain shorter and broader pieces that were suited to his purpose, and bade the carpenter plane them smooth. He laid out scales, watching with a small square and a pair of compass, and engraved them with utmost care. He wrought brass into curious shapes, and from morning till night he kept at the task, frowning and ciphering and sitting deep in thought. He called for charcoal and a mortar, and beat the charcoal to a fine powder, and tempered it with linseed oil. This he rubbed into the wood he had shaped to his liking, and watched it a long while, now and again touching it to try it, and then with oil from a phial he had found in a chest in the great cabin, he rubbed the wood clean, and there were left in the wood, set off nearly in black, the graduating and figures he had so exactly etched. Taking his work into the great cabin, he toiled on by lantern, and until a late night, and there through the open door men as they passed might see him hunched over the table with his medley of tools about him. But when at last he leaned back and drew a long breath of relief, very serious and very wise, his work was done, and curious and deftly contrived it was. On the table before him there lay a cross-staff, a nocturnal, and a gunter's scale. With which, said he to the old one, who sat opposite him quietly, taking tobacco and sipping wine, and with what instruments the thief hath left us, a man can navigate a ship where he will. Examining closely the nocturnal, which was intrinsically carved and engraved, the old one muttered, as if ignoring Jacob's words, I will yet lime that bird. Though he be never so mad a callant, I misdoubt he will put his head into a noose, said Jacob in his thick, serious voice. Be he the one we think or not, the one we think, I will set him such a trap, said the old one, as will take the cunningest fox that ever doubled on the hounds. And the thin face smiled in a way that was not pleasant to see. Chapter 14. A Wonderful Excellent Cook. As an astrologer or an Arabian incanter could say to a man, beware of this or that, or for it is a thing conceived of the devil to work thy ruin, there would be reason for studying the stars or smiting the sand, and this indeed they do according to the old tales. But if a sailor seek out an astrologer to learn things that shall profit him, he is more likely to find a man grown foolish by much study, who will stroke his chin sagely and say, Come, let us look into this matter. Under Capricorn are all diseases in the knees and hams, laprosis, itches and scales, and tumors, fallen grounds, and barren fields, ox houses and cow houses, low dark places near the ground, and places where sails and materials for ships be laid. And while he talks of fixed angels and of the Lord of the Ascendant being in the 4th week, some shall unsuspected thing may be the very egg on which the devil is sitting, like an old black hen, to hatch forth a general calamity. Thus certain incidents that shortly thereafter happened are to the point, for although they appeared of little moment at the time, they turned the tide of men's lives and made a stir that has to do with the current of my tale. Now the men of the Rose of Devon sighted a sail at high noon, when they were a week on their way south, and though she showed her heels and ran, and though the Rose of Devon lacked her mizzenmast, the strange vessel was but a small pink, and so slow that they laid her aboard 2 hours before dark. In her crew she had only a dozen men, and sorely frightened they were, as they tossed in the lee of the Dark Frigate. So, to save themselves from a more cruel fate than there was scarcely one of them had leaped at the chance to join the Rose of Devon's crew. They tumbled up their small cargo of salt fish for Bilbao, and hoisted it on board the ship, together with their shallop, and casting their pink adrift, they forbore from complaining when their new master and his new stole whatever pleased them, from the new man's rings and knives to the very clothes on their backs. So with their plunder and their recruits, the Rose of Devon again squared her yards and continued on her course. There was, to be sure, one fellow of mean spirit who whined dolefully upon conceiving his present extremities to be distasteful. But another got comfort by knocking him on the head when no one was looking, and finding him dead, the old one hove him overboard, and there was no further trouble from the fishermen. Yet it was no secret that there was complaining forward among the gentlemen of the Rose of Devon, so the old one sent the boatswain to summon them aft when the watches were changing. He leaned against the swivel gun on the quarter-deck, and, looking down into their faces, smiled disagreeably. "It hath come to my ears," said he, "that one hath a sad tale to tell because we failed to take the Porcupine, which, though a mere ketch, outnumbered us in guns and men. And another hath a sad tale to tell because this pink that late became our prize is small and of little worth, though we got from her 11 brave fellows who shall be worth a store of fine gold." He looked from one of his men to another, for they were all there, Martin and the cook, and Philip Marsham, and Will Canty, and Paul Craig, and Joe Kirk, the one-eyed carpenter, and the rest, and his thin face settled into the many wrinkles that had got him his name. There was none of them, unless it might be Harry Malcolm or old Jacob, who could say surely at one time or another that thoughts were uppermost in Tom Jordan's shrewd head. "Come now, my hearts of gold," he cried, "let us have an end of such folly. Said I not that these northern fisheries were meat for crows, and that we must go south to find prey for eagles? We will choose a fine harbor by some green island, where there's rich fruit for the picking and fat fish for the catching, and we will build there a town of our own. We will take toll from the King of Spain's ships. We will take us gold and wine from the islands. Yea, we will lay up a great store of riches, and live in fullness of bread and abundance of idleness." Some were pleased, but some doubted still, which the old one perceiving, for he read their faces, cried, "Nay, speak up, speak up. Let us have no fair protesting friends with hollow and undermining hearts." "Yea, it is a fair tale," cried one in a surly voice, "but thus far we have blows to show for our pains, blows and a kettle of fish." "And methinks," another growled, "we shall see more salt fish than of fine wine and gold." "'Tis a swinish thought," the old one retorted, but he smiled. Then he said it, so that they took no offense, for of such grumbling he had no fear. He was set a catch a bird of quite another feather. Then old Jacob rose, and they were silent to hear him. Let us make an end of talk, said he slowly. We are on our way south. To stop, or turn aside, would be nothing but foolishness. And with that, although they had expected him to say more, he turned away. Then of a sudden, "Come, Will," the old one cried, singling out his man from all the rest. "What say you?" If Will Canty's face changed at all, it was a whit the paler as he met the old one's eyes. "I say," he replied, "that since we have fish on board, we are sure of fish, and would do well to eat fish ere we lose it." "There is sooth in thy words," quoted the old one, and he smiled his friendly wise. But despite his smile, he liked the words little, as any shrewd man might have known by his eyes, and Will Canty was no fool. "Come, cook," said, "and boil us a great kettle of fish." The rumble of low voices changed to laughter, and the cook boldly cried, "Yea, yea, master." "For our much voyagers and many pains," cried the men, as they went about their work, "we have got a kettle of fish." And they laughed mightily. It was the very thing before that made them grumble, but now they saw it as a droll affair, and made of it many jests, of which a few were good, and more bad after a manner of jests. As for the cook, he called his mate and bade him break out a drum of fish, and set a kettle to boil, and cuffed him this way and that, till the poor fellow's ears were swollen. And the old one said to Harry Malcolm, "Saw you not how deftly the fellow twisted out of the corner, and with a sly remark that no one can take amiss? Oh, he is a slippery dog, and I am minded to cut his throat out of hand." Now that would be very foolish, for where there's one of them, there's always two, and the one will toll the other on until there are two dogs by the heels instead of one. At that the old one laughed harshly, and the two, who were after a left-handed fashion uncommonly congenial, went off well pleased with their conceit. Down in the hold the kettle boiled right merrily, and the cook swelled with pride that he had a mate to carry and fetch. He cuffed the poor fellow this way and cuffed him that. He threw a pan at him, and when the fire smoke worsened than commonly was, he thrust a fistful of flour into his face and down his neck. When he let the fire lag, he flung him his length on the floor for spilling a pint of water. And when in despair the lad fled for his life, the cook seized him by the hair and hauled him back, and put a long knife at his throat, and swore to have his heart's blood. Oh, the cook was in rare and merry mood, for he had drunk more sack than was good for him from the cask he had marked as his own. But he had waxed exceedingly happy and haughty, and sack had dulled his wits, and he was drunker than he knew. "Come, thou pig, thou son of a swine," he yelled, "ladle out the fish, and choose of the best for the cabin. Ye choose in abundance, and summon the master's boy, and bid him haste, and do thou bestir thyself and carry on the men." And with that he fetched the poor fellow a blow on the head, which knocked him off his feet. The fellow ran to do the work, and the cook, in vast satisfaction at having so well acquitted himself, sat down with a goblet of sack, and tippled and nodded, and kept an ill-tempered eye on the master's boy and his own, as with shrewd fear of broken heads they scurried back and forth. "It is most wonderful, excellent sack," quoted the cook, and with his sleeve he mopped his fiery bald head. "It was by a happy stroke I marked it for my own, truly. I would rather be cook than master, for here I sit with mine eye upon the cabin stores, from which I can choose and eat at will, and the captain, nay, the Lord High Admiral of the England, is himself none the wiser. Fish, sayest thou? Nay, fish is at best a poor man's food. I will have none of it. And thus he ran on foolishly, forgetting, as he drank sack, that there was no one to hear him, not even his mate. Truly, I am a wonderful, excellent cook. I may in time become a captain. I may even become the governor of a plantation, and take for a wife some handsome Spanish woman with a wonderful rich dowry. She must have an excellent rich dowry if she will marry me, though. Yea, I am a wonderful excellent cook. And the more he drank, the more foolish he became. After a while he took his head upon one side. Quoth he, I hear them calling and shouting. It seemed they are singing, Huzzah for me. I hear them coming down to do me honor. Truly, I am a most wonderful excellent cook. And the fish hath pleased them well. Foolish one that they are to eat it. The silly fellow sat with his head on one side and smiled when they burst in upon him. Hast come for more fish? He cried. Yonder stands the kettle. Nay, what's that? What's that thou sayest? Nay, fellow, thou'rt mad. Thou knowest not to whom thou speakest. Fool, knave, scoundrel, swine, they yelled. Oh, such a beating as thy fat carcass will get. Hear you not the uproar? Think you to cozen us? With that they seized him, 2 by the head and 2 by the feet, and dragged him to the ladder. They threw a rope about him and knotted it fast, and tossed the ends to men at the hatch above, who hauled him, squealing and kicking like an old hog, up on deck. To the cabin they dragged him, with all the men shrieking curses at him and pelleting him with chunks of fish. And in the cabin they stood him before the table where the old one and Harry Malcolm sat, and very angry were they all. Dog of a cook, said the old one, for a relish to conclude our meal, we shall see thee eat of this fish that the boy hath brought us. And he thrust before the cook a great dish. Eat it, every shred, bones and all, said he, or I'll have thee butchered and boiled in place of it. Why now, said the cook, somewhat sobered by the rough handling and a trifle perplexed, but for all that still well pleased with himself. As for the bones, they are liable to scrape a man's throat going down. I am reluctant to eat bones, but the meat is good. I rejoice to partake of it, for so diligently have I labored to prepare it, that I have denied myself, yea, though I hungered greatly. Eat, said the old one, and widely he grinned, looking suspicious about him, for there were something in their manner that he failed to understand. The cook thrust his hand into the dish, and took from it a great slice of fish, which he crammed into his mouth. Eat, said the old one, eat, O thou jewel among cooks. A curious look came over the cook's face, and he raised his hand as if to take the fish out of his mouth. Nay, swallow it down, said the old one. Be not sparing. There is abundance in the dish. Yea, thou shalt stand there eating for a long time to come. And though he smiled, his look made it plain that he was in no trifling mood. The cook turned pale and choked and gasped. Water, he cried thickly, for his mouth was too full for easy speech. Nay, much drinking hath wrought havoc with thy wits. Eat on, eat on. Prodigious were the gulps by which the cook succeeded at last to swallow his huge mouthfuls, and great was his distress, for the salt in it nearly choked him. Water, water, he weakly cried. Nay, temper thy heart with mercy, master. I beg for water. I beseech for water. Eat on, the old one grimly said. Then Harry Malcolm chuckled, and the men in the door roared with laughter, but the cook plunked down on his fat knees and thrust out both his hands. "Nay, master, I cannot hold it down." "Eat on, O jewel among cooks." "Nay, master." "Come then, lads, and cram it down his haughty throat." 3 of them seized him, and one, when he shut tight his mouth, thrust a knife between his teeth. "Blooba, blooba, blooa," he yelled. "I'll eat, I'll eat." They let him go, and he rose and ate. Time and again he gasped for water, and they laughed. Time and again he lagged, and the old one cried, "Eat on." When at last he stood miserably in front of the empty dish, the old one said, "For a day and a night shalt thou sit in bilboes with dry throat, which will be a lesson to learn thee 2 things. First, before cooking a kettle of fish, do thou bear it well in mind to soak out the salt, so that the fish be fit for food. And second, by way of common prudence, do thou sample for thyself the dishes that are cooked for the cabin." They hauled him forward and locked the shackles on his feet and placed beside him a great dish of the fish, that whoever wished might pellet him with it. And there they left him to repent of his folly and forswear drunkenness and whimper for water. As the weary hours passed, the sun tormented him in his insufferable thirst. But nightfall is a measure-wrought relief, and he nodded in a darkness and fell asleep. Waking, he would rub his hand, which sadly throbbed, and would seek by gulping to ease his parched throat. And sleeping again, he would dream of great buckets of clear water. The voices that he heard buzzed in his ears as if they were droning flies, and hunching himself down in his shackles at one end of the iron bar, he forgot the world and was forgotten, since his fat carcass lay inertly in a black shadow, and there was nothing to make a man keep him in mind. He heard at last a voice saying, "But nevertheless, it becomes you to walk lightly and carefully." And another replied, "I fear him not, for all his subtle ways, much that goes on escapes him." He stirred uneasily and opened his eyes, and saw that there were 2 men leaning side by side against the forecastle. "In the matter of wit, you grant him less than his due," said the first speaker, "and in another matter you charge him with a heavier burden than he needs bear." The cook stirred and groaned, and the first speaker chuckled, at which the cook's gorge rose from anger. "A jewel among cooks," one of the 2 called softly, and the unhappy man knew by the voice that the speaker was Philip Marsham. Naming no names and talking in roundabout phrases, as people do when they wish one to know their meaning and another not to, the 2 continued, with no heed at all at the cook, whom they thought a mere drunkard lout. And indeed, their undertones were scarcely audible, but anger sharpened the cook's ears and his wits, and he lay and ruminated over such chance sentences as he got. "It puzzled me from the first," said the other, "to see how easily you bore with their comrade of the road." "Why, he is a good soul in his way." The other gave a grunt of disgust. "Nay, it is a wonder to me that a lad with your nice notions ever found his way to sea," Phil retorted. "And I might never have gone, had not Captain Francis Candle been my godfather. As for me, I have seen both sides of life, and but for a certain thing that happened, I might be well enough contented where I am." "And that?" Phil hesitated, for though they had talked freely, as young men will, the question searched a side of Phil's life to which as yet he had given no clue. "Why," said he, lowering his voice, "for one thing, I saw for the first time my own grandfather, and for another, I saw a certain old knight who quite won my fancy, from which a man as a certain one we know. Come, let us stroll together." and as they walked the deck that night, arm in arm, Phil told his companion what his life had been and what it might have been, and mentioned in passing the girl at the inn. Left to his miseries and his thoughts, of which the first were little better company than the second, the woeful cook turned over and over in his fat head such fragments of their talk as he had succeeded in overhearing, and to say truth, he made little more out of it all than the speakers had intended. But his parched throat teased his wits to greater effort, and being come to such a state that he would have bartered his immortal soul for water, had chance offered, he bethought him of a plan by which, if luck held good, he might escape from his shackles. The moment for which he waited was a long time coming, and he suffered a great variety of increasing miseries before it arrived. But when the watches changed, he saw arrived on deck his dearest friend, and somewhat reluctantly forgiving his dear friend for belaboring him over the head with a whole saltfish, the cook softly called the man by name. The fellow came snickering, which made in none the easier to bespeak his aid, but the cook nevertheless swallowed his wrath as well as his dry throat he could, and whispered to the fellow that he must make haste and tell the master there was news to be imparted in secret. At this the fellow held up his hand with thumb thrust between first and second fingers. "Give me no fico," wailed the most excellent cook. "Nay, I have stumbled upon a black and hidden matter. Go thou, and in haste, and it will pay thee well." For a time they bickered in the dark, but there was in the cook's despair a sincerity that finally made the fellow believe the tale, and finding, upon stealing aft, that there was still a light in the great cabin, he mustered up his courage and knocked. "Enter," cried a hard voice. The fellow opened the door and peeped in, and found the old one sitting alone at the table, glancing hastily about, and the more alarmed to meet the cold eye of Harry Malcolm, who lay on the great bed in corner of the cabin. He closed the door at his back and whispered, "He swears it's true, that there's foul work afoot. 'Tis the cook who hath told me, yea, and hath bade me tell you." He would say no more. The cook, I mean. "Oh, my good friend, our most excellent cook." Meditating, the old one looked the fellow up and down. "Here," said he, "strike off his shackles and send him with the key." And he threw the fellow the key to the locks. After a while the cook came weakly in and shut the door behind him, and throwing the key on the table, fell into a chair. "Ah," said the old one, "what is this tale I have heard news of?" "Water," gasped the cook, for though he had managed by pausing at the butt on his way to drink nearly a quart, he had no mind that the old one should know of it. The old one smiled. "Go drink, if thy tale be worth it. But mind, if I deem thy tale not worth it, thou shalt pay with a drop of blood for every drop of water." The cook shot a doubting glance at the old one, but went none the less, and came back wiping his lips. "Have it thy tale," said the old one. There was a quiver in the cook's voice, for he was by no means sure of how great a tale he could make, and the master's face gave him small encouragement, for from the beginning of the tale to the end, the old one never altered his cold, cruel smile. "It was the boatswain, the young Canty," said he. "Ah!" They was leaning on the forecastle and walking the deck arm in arm, and talking of one thing and another. "And what did they say?" "They talked about someone's slow wit, and I could not make sure whose, for they scoffed at me bitterly. And Canty was bepuzzled by the boatswain's ways, and he wanted him to do something or other. Go on." The old one, grinning coldly, leaned back and watched the laboring cook, who wrecked his racked his few brains to make a worthwhile story. Nay, but I heard little else. Yet, said I, the master must know at all costs. What a thick head is thine, and how easily seen through and through. The old one laughed. Think ye all this is worth a second thought? I am of the mind to have you skinned and salted, but I forgive you, since I have a milkish heart that is easily moved to pity. Get you down to your berth and sleep. The cook departed in haste, but with a fleeting glance at Harry Malcolm, whom he feared less only than the master. He was aware that for some reason he did not understand, his broken tale had served his purpose. When he had gone, the old one turned about. You heard him? What think ye? He said. From the great bed in the corner, Harry Malcolm raised his head and laughed silently. Our able cook was hard-pressed for an excuse to get out of his ankle-rings. Did you hear him slopping at the butt the first time passing? As for his tale, we know what we know, and no more. Slow wit, I wonder. At Barraco we shall see, said Harry Malcolm. Neither one nor dozen can harm us before we raise land. And after raising land, which by God's mercy be soon, now we shall see whose wits will nick first when the edges crack together. The old one scratched and yawned, and Harry Malcolm softly laughed. And we will continue this story next Friday or Saturday. And thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.